One California Democrat, this is a bit surprising, California Democrat, who apparently is outgoing, California State Senator Susan Talamantes Eggman. She cannot be with her fellow Democrats on a particular piece of legislation where you think it would be pretty straightforward, but not with what that party has become in places like California and, frankly, the rest of the country.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Um, I'd like to say, as a progressive, proud member of this body for the last 12 years, I'm done. I'm done with us protecting people who would buy and abuse our children. I'm done. I don't want to send more black and brown men to prison. I don't want more people in prison, but I don't want people buying girls. I don't want people buying little girls anymore. And I'm tired of saying it's okay and that we have to protect the men who do it. As a mental health professional and as a social worker, I can tell you I've spent my entire career working with people who have been wounded. I'm not going to say beyond repair, but they have been wounded to their core by the abuse that's been heaped on them, oftentimes by those that they love and look to protect them. And if their parents won't do it, then by God, we should. Again, I am not arguing that we open the gates to flood our prisons with people, but I am arguing that we have a moral responsibility to say enough. Enough. We have given away enough on this area, and we've got to move back into the center, or we all look like fools and laughing stocks. And what do we stand for? I ask all of you to watch the documentary that Senator Grove was in, Senator from Kern County was just in, that talked about this very place in Sacramento where girls are being bought and sold. Men are being given a little slap in the hand or a couple days, and then they're back out again, and they do the same thing. They get caught over and over and over again, and somehow that's okay. It's not okay. It is not okay anymore, and no more am I watching. Like I said, I'm leaving.
I had no idea that if you pay for sex with a minor, it is a misdemeanor in the state of California.
So, Senate Bill 1414, solicitation of a minor, introduced in February to upgrade the crime of soliciting from a minor from a misdemeanor to a felony, carrying a 2 to 4 year prison sentence, payment of a fine, and sex offender registration. She was responding to colleagues of hers who made amendments to the bill, uh, uh, making changes such that solicitation of a felony solicitation would not be a felony if the minor was 16 or 17 years old, which would effectively be protecting some child abusers, as is obvious and is what got State Senator Talamantes Eggman exercised. But that's where things are at. In addition to maybe that documentary she mentioned, she could urge her colleagues to watch the surprise breakout hit of last year. That would be Sound of Freedom. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Paul Hutchinson, who's the founder of the Child Liberation Foundation, and he was the executive producer of Sound of Freedom. Paul, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good to be here with you.
So it's probably jarring for at least a lot of our audience to hear the sorts of debates that are happening in the halls of power, like the California State Legislature, but there really is this resistance within some quarters of our politics to I think doing what everybody would want done, which is to come down as hard on human traffickers and child predators as the law would allow.
Absolutely. It's been frustrating for a long time, and getting the Sound of Freedom film, getting it out to the public, we hit up against the establishment, we hit up against big media and Hollywood, and just trying to get it out. And what was appalling is even after it was becoming the number one independent film in the world, we still had people that were coming out and burying the story that we were doing so well. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the agenda of Big Hollywood? What is the agenda of what things they're going to bring into our homes? And on the political scale, this is something we can all get behind. I mean, we can argue about save the trees or save the whales or whatever else, but saving the children, This shouldn't be a political issue. It never should be a political issue.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the cover of Sound of Freedom. We talked about it. It was really interesting and curious. That it was, sort of right wing fantasy film, and really not just tried to mute its success, but also tried to suggest that it had some sort of partisan political agenda, that it was not rooted in reality. I mean, there was just a lot of curious attacks on the film that was otherwise, a pretty straightforward hero story that wouldn't be unusual in Hollywood in a different era.
100%. We when if anybody in the audience has not seen the film, go see it, and you'll realize there is not a right wing agenda anywhere in it. I mean, the only somewhat religious sentence in the entire film was that God's children are not for sale. That should be a non-negotiable. God's children, whether you call them God's children, the universe children, doesn't matter. Children are not for sale. And unfortunately, they took a lot of the comments of one of our star actors, Jim Caviezel, with speaking at some QAnon events and whatnot, to say that that's what the film is about, and it's not. The reality is that we've arrested just as many people on the right as we have the left. This is a humanity issue. It's not a right or left, and neither should things like that border wall. That should have never been a political issue. It's a human trafficking problem. Hundreds of thousands of children coming across undocumented. Parents losing kids every day in Latin America, with a very real chance of being taken up to that border.
I know that you've got a forthcoming book that gives some of the backstory to the movie. Can you give us a little taste of what sorts of heretofore undisclosed details we'll get?
Absolutely. In fact, you can go to soundoffreedombook.com, and it'll hyperlink you right to the page where you can pre-sign up or get some more information. But the film, we took 8 different rescue missions and a lot of different operators in those different missions in different countries, and put them all together into one storyline with a handful of actors. The jungle scene, that wasn't in Colombia. It was in Haiti, and it was after a little boy, not a little girl, and it was an entirely different team. But in the book, I go through the first half is in making an undercover operator. I've led 70 undercover missions in 15 countries since the time of the Colombia one that the movie was highlighting, and I go into detail about things that parents can do to keep their children safe and be aware of some of the signs of grooming, et cetera. So you can go to just soundoffreedombook.com and get some more information.
Now, back to the border issue that you just mentioned. Is your group or your foundation, Child Liberation Foundation, doing anything to try and stop or rescue those kids that are, being taken over the border illegally and then thrown into the sex trafficking industry?
There's a lot that's being done. We are here right now in South America. We are in Colombia today. We were in Costa Rica recently, in Mexico, working with political officials, helping them change policy. There are kids disappearing every day in these major cities. And we have a program of bringing backpacks with identification cards of places that they can call to get some help with some hygiene items, et cetera, for the kids coming across the border. But the reality is we need to have policy changes. There's U.S. taxpayer dollars that are funding these children coming across the border to be placed in new homes that we would all hope would be vetted properly, but there's not the vetting done that we are all hoping for, and these kids come across with a phone number, with an address, and loaded with fear of, hey, we know where your mom lives, we know your sister lives. If you don't follow this, and that, then something bad could happen, and this happens all the time. And we tried to highlight that a little bit in the movie with the little boy that was coming across the border, but we've seen it over and over again.
The undercover rescue missions that you've led, I mean, you're a business guy, so what exactly is that like? Obviously, there's a one profiled in Sound of Freedom, and but I mean, give us a sense of what that looks like. I mean, do you use people with military training? Is this sort of like or more is it sort of like almost ministerial, like it's a religious delegation that goes to try to
Yeah.
negotiate, or how does it work?
Yeah. So in the first rescue mission that I did, in the movie Sound of Freedom, the wealthy billion-dollar fund manager who was asked to come and fund the rescue, Pablo in the movie, that's me in real life.
Oh,
And for the first year, year and a half, I was recruited in the beginning by the Homeland Security agent, by our Attorney General, to help participate in these missions because of the fact that the demand was coming from people like Jeffrey Epstein and his cronies. And so these
Mm.
traffickers throughout Latin America were used to having somebody with a big ego and a big checkbook. In fact, the very first mission, I got the call from Jim Caviezel's character. He said, Paul, he said, I found not just 20 children in Cartagena. There's more than 50, more than 100 children in the surrounding areas. He said, we could rescue all of them on the same day, but I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need? And thinking he needed money, and he goes, no, I need you. Yeah, can you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said the head trafficker has a piece of property he wants to develop into a child brothel sex resort, like a Jeffrey Epstein Island. And he said he needs a few $1,000,000 to build it out, and he believes he can make tens of millions of dollars a year selling children to wealthy Americans. He said, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to wear a $50,000 watch and a $4,000 suit and negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. He said, I don't know of any ultra-successful business owners who's had the training that you've had. He said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. And so that was
Wow.
10 years ago. And I just came out of doing undercover work just 2 months before we signed the contract with Angel Studios to come out with the movie. But I've led missions everywhere, and in the beginning was just coming in as that wealthy buyer. But then over time went in deep cover and set up these sting operations all around the world.
and you were able to
That's
get them, right, by doing that, by posing and
Yeah,
going through with it?
well, you don't want to, we have to be careful. You're not creating trafficking. You don't want to be buying them straight out because that creates more of a demand. Instead, we had different tactics. One, I went in a jungle dressed as a doctor just so that we could get close to some of the traffickers that were in there. And then once we've identified where the children are, then we have different types of sting operations to get the kids out. Some of them, like what we highlighted in The Sound of Freedom, where we had a quote-unquote party and the traffickers brought the children, and then we did the sting, took the traffickers out, and then, of course, got the children back to their homes.
And that's a
it's
true story.
incredible. I
Wow.
mean, it's incredible, and also to the Billy Camp character. And by the way, the kudos for getting Billy Camp. He's such a good character actor. He
Yeah.
really added a lot to the film. But the Billy Camp character in Sound of Freedom. Are you is part of this like identifying people who know the landscape, and then
Well,
obviously not part of the trafficking, and in different countries and different regions, like trying to develop those assets too?
Absolutely. In fact, one of my informants, while in Latin America, one of my informants was the drug lord in the area. He was the head of the cartel, and he said, "Listen, you may not agree with how I do business, quote unquote." He said, "But I've got children of my own, and those guys are evil, and I'm going to kill them. And if I do, you've got a bunch of little kids you don't know where they are, or I tell you everything I know. You get those guys out." And you get the kids out, get them back to their families, make sure those guys go to jail, and I'll take care of it from there. So, some of the times that the cartel is involved, but in cases like that one, they were informants. In fact, in the movie, Vampiro, played by Bill Camp, he's a real character. We've worked with his name is Steve. He goes by Batman undercover, and he did work with the cartel and is an informant just like that. But he was not involved directly on that rescue mission, but the producers wanted to include his character as part of all the missions that we did in the movie.
Yeah, that was a good inclusion. It's fascinating. Paul Hutchinson is the founder of the Child Liberation Foundation. He is the executive producer of The Sound of Freedom. And go to soundoffreedombook.com to get in queue for his upcoming book that gives the backstory to the movie and what his organization is doing, more details, these stories like he's sharing. I mean, it's incredible. The Lord's work that you're doing. I mean, wow, really impressive.
Uh,
Thanks so
Yeah.
much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Super grateful to be here with you.
Yes. Thanks very much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
As a business owner, do you have a strategy for exiting your business? Most business owners don't. Studies done by the Exit Planning Institute show 75% of business owners who don't have an exit plan